Hello, everyone, and welcome to Zero Day Dispatch's monthly dialogue series. I'm Priya, the founder of Zero Day Dispatch, and I'm joined today by Rohana, our cyber policy research associate, and perhaps Irene Courtney, our community outreach coordinator, will join us in a moment. This strategic dialogue examines how large language models like GPT, Gemini, and Claude, primarily developed by Western corporations, have become core AI infrastructure for information access, content creation, and decision making across low and middle income countries. Their growing adoption raises important questions about knowledge sovereignty, cultural preservation, environmental impact, and economic autonomy. While these models expand access to information, they can also carry embedded Western assumptions and values that may unintentionally sideline local knowledge systems when used in education, governance, and cultural production. To unpack these themes, we are joined today by two distinguished experts, Dr. Charru Malhotra from India and Susan Otieno from Kenya. Before we introduce our guest speakers, Rohana will outline some housekeeping rules for the session. Hi, Rohana.
Welcome, everyone, and hi, Priya. Before we dive in, let me quickly run through some Zoom tips to help us have a great session together. This will be a 1 hour discussion. There will be 10 to 12 minutes allotted for our guest speakers. The last 15 minutes are allocated to the audience for their questions. Uh, Please be aware that this session is being recorded, and by participating, you consent to being recorded. All attendees will be muted throughout the presentation. Only the speaker and the host will have their video on. Attendees can keep their video off or on. Please use the chat box to submit questions. We will address them during the Q&A session at the end. We recommend using Speaker View for the best experience. This recording will be submitted to various social media outlets and it will be free of charge and for educational purposes only.
Thank you so much, Rohana. And now I'm delighted to introduce our first guest speaker. She is Dr. Charru Malhotra, a distinguished authority in digital governance, AI, and cybersecurity with over 33 years of experience. She currently serves as a senior professor and lead coordinator of the Center for E-Governance and ICT at the Indian Institute of Public Administration. IIPA is a premier government institute headed by the Vice President of the country. Dr. Malhotra's work focuses on application of design thinking in implementing digital governance to promote the ethical use of AI and ensuring transparency, fairness, and robust cybersecurity to build trust in digital technologies and cyberspace. Welcome, Charru.
Thank you. Thanks a lot and for this wonderful introduction. And thanks to my co-speaker. I'm so delighted, Susan, to have you on board. So now, with everybody's permission, I'm going to start with my presentation so that it's easier for us to remain on the same page. I hope I'm audible enough.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So, just a little more background to what was told. The joy of working in this subject came from the fact that I was exposed to 600 villages across my country by understanding East Zone, West Zone, North, South, Northeast, and South. So, this was a long journey of 4 to 5 years where I would visit, these villages and trying to understand technology adoption, preferences in these people and their cultural context. So when I submitted my PhD, some respect and some acknowledgement and laurels came from the top people in the country and a lot of awards. I am very humbled and thankful for that. Okay, so now I start with the topic and how do I intend to go about it is to first focus on the dilemma, then how this dilemma can be thought of in at various levels. What is India doing about it and what do we need to do together about it? The biggest dilemma is this $1 trillion club. Okay, the hegemony of West, or if we could say big tech companies, who already have all the data set, who already have all the C's, that is clouds, chips, and computing power. The reasoning behind that, the algos, which we'll see subsequently, how they are deeply influenced by a particular part of the world and not the other part. And of course, all the people who are draining out of our countries to join these big techs because of all, obviously, the economic reasons. So, what is happening is AI is now becoming a kind of a closed club, and everybody else could be isolated, and everybody else means low and middle income countries, and of course, the outliers in these countries. What are the core concerns when this dilemma is facing on us, right across us, is sitting right across us? Our small and medium enterprises, SMEs, are facing one set of problems. The users are facing another set of problems. The data itself is going through various levels of filters, which probably are not doing justice to the ground reality. And last but not the least, the whole society is in a kind of chaos and kind of a confusion, where different kind of disorders are coming because of this all pervasive content and its echo chambers around it. So, if I just have to look at how our small and medium organizations suffering, first and foremost is obviously the expensive resources. All of us are aware that AI is data guzzler, AI is compute guzzler. Everything is so expensive, and all this is lying concentrated in few hands. So, as a result, either the rest of the countries and those smaller organizations proceed on the path of technology sovereignty, which is definitely not an easy task. You can't just wink your eye and expect a data center to be set up, or a chip of particular nano meter to be established in a country. You still rely on external supply chains for that, which are under control of few big techs. Environmental concerns, I'll go deeper into it subsequently through an example also. The kind of carbon emissions that are coming up, the kind of carbon footprints, energy consumptions are raising different kind of concerns, not just in the organizations but in the ecosystem around that. The data, of course, is constantly traveling across those silent pipes of dark web. uh, Exposures, unwanted personality hacks or personality deceptions, fake information, etc., coming because of breach of privacy, are some other concerns which probably not just organization but countries need to look in together. If you look at the last small core of this Venn diagram, it is digital well being and human rights concern. The more I read about these set of problems, I realize that certain big techs, you know the names, I don't have to say it, it's on the screen. They are using lot of slave laborers, or they are using lot of underpaid workers at the rate of $2 per hour in set of countries, not just Kenya but many other countries, to constantly label the data being shown on LLMs, or to constantly filter this data from all the toxic content. That means what? This labor is not just underpaid, but they are constantly exposed to pornography images, domestic violence, violence against animals, child abuse, etc. So imagine the kind of chaos it's creating in their head. So, if you look at one of those, in interviews that I was reading in a very authentic source, the person who was employed, we called it Kenyan moderator because they're moderating the content of these GPTs or LLMs. It He just said, or she just said, they said, it has destroyed me completely. And if you would, deep dive into this research, you would find that the number of divorces, the number of family breakups that are happening in these parts of our world, which are employed as AI moderators or AI labelers or AI laborers or AI workers, it is very sad. Families are breaking down, people, emotional well-being is breaking down constantly because they are exposed to graphic content, they are being paid minimum, and their dismissals, like in any other gig economy, is very abrupt and without information. Okay, I talked about resource guzzling. I talked about carbon emission. That's one of my concerns, has been my concern for donkey years now. But look at this news item that speaks in itself. Elon Musk's center in Memphis, he called it as closest, was actually set up after so many bureaucratic approvals in that particular area taken in a very hush hush manner. But very soon, the local populace created revolution, sort of revolution, to protest against it. It was, the data center was set up under the garb of providing employment opportunities to the local people, but what it ended up doing was extreme energy use. So as a result, the electricity being given to the normal household was being guzzled out and was being fed to the data center. There was heavy reliance on fossil fuels reported. It also strained local supply of water. Toxic emissions that were discovered in that area, there is a complete report on that, was very pathetic. And of course, it led to a different set of health risks. So data center in itself might be an upcoming lucrative $1 trillion kind of economy generator or catalyst. But let us not forget, it has a ripple effect on not other countries, but in the local countries or the local societies in which it is set up. That is again one of the concerns I have. Another concern which I've not listed here, but as a professor reading about it, I recently realized that maybe this data center hype might have a fall, and all that is being invested might yield nothing or nothing substantial. So this is some kind of imbalance that I wanted to bring to the notice of our audience. The second part is particular use of GPTs, like Rohana just introduced and talked about, and Priya had also discussed with me, is this use is creating a total, lopsided perspective of creativity, lopsided perspective of IPR, IPR is in individual protection rights, intellectual protection rights, I'm sorry, copyright violations, etc. Okay, now this is something which people who are fountainhead of knowledge or creativity are totally bewildered about. Not just that, the data that this model is consuming, the GPT models are consuming, could be focused or over focused on one part of or one kind of content or one part of the world, and not the entire homogeneous representation of the entire world. Apart from this, let us also understand the machines are not just hallucinating, they are going gibberish. If you do more research, you would find there have been instances when two robotic representations, and they were actually fighting with each other in gibberish language, actually fighting. So how it was realized that a lot of words that were sliced between this gibberish language were all abusive content. And this certainly shook us up, because that means maybe two machines are not just capable of giving us wrong or biased data, but is capable of entering into emotional ego struggles or ego clashes with each other, the intangible part, the tangible part, saying something which we don't understand. So this is another aspect which we need to look into because of all pervasive use of GPTs. I'll take a deep breath and come back to present. At present, the kind of ruckus, if I could say, created by misinformation and disinformation in the society, two enemy nations using against each other through deep fakes, some false narratives, is also a major concern. It has led to what we call as In simple words, non-kinetic warfare or non-cognitive or cognitive warfare. And in a little more, technical words, it's called as strategic cyber information influence operations. So we have to understand that enemy countries are using fake news, misinformation, disinformation during peak election times or public gatherings or such moments where not even a single blood is shed, but countries could come on loggerheads because of the mass revolt or because of the misinformation generated some kind of unrest, if not a revolt. So all this is extra is getting propelled further by rogue elements who don't even know programming but can misuse GPTs to create programs. Earlier, if we had to write a program, I remember the first AI program I wrote was in 1983, would take us days together. And to process it would take a certain set of days. We'll type it on Holbrook cards, it will go, the deck will go, come back. Now, in a blink of eye, any cyber criminal, even if they don't know a single line of code, are able to create malware. So this misuse of Gen AI is a complete dark side that we need to be wary of and take immediate action, especially when agentic AI is all around us. Okay, then poisonous prompts and SQL injections and data poisoning also through English, simple English line, okay, because don't forget it is generative AI is rattling the whole sanity of cyber world. So I can go on and on about GPTs, but the important take here is that this has become a very strong tool weaponized by rogue actors. So when I was talking about biasness of AI models with special reference to West influences on it, you would be shocked to know that the content visibility, the digital experiences, the recommendations, the kind of decisions being taken are all colored. Okay. And this profiling is so unexplainable, is so opaque that we can't even fathom how the decision was taken, despite the apparent explainability that has been recently added into these GPTs or LLMs. Another example to prove my point. Amazon's AI hiring system is was given data of last few years to become minimum human intervention based machine for hiring in future. And what did it do? It started penalizing those series. In the sense, penalizing means keeping it at the back end and not at the front. If anything which refer to like a part of women club, okay, so that is taken as a fishy kind of a resume and is kept behind, and so many other connotations through the name, etc., which we'll see in subsequent example also. And eventually Amazon had to stop this tool in its hiring process because of its preferences or biased preferences, if I could say. Why? Because maybe this was being done in the past and that's what the data conveyed, and that's how the tool got modified. Now, I picked up some data. We find the bias rate in all these GPTs and LLMs in various kinds of questions, both open-ended and closed-ended, vary from 25% to 60%. It's as biased as that. And this is a scientific research. I've given the resource. Priya could share with the audience if they need it. Okay, so in multiple choice questions, this increases, the biasness increases in multiple choice questions. Going further, the cultural context in AI at present is also deeply questionable. If we examine the constructs through which the version of truth in quotes, is being picked up by AI system at present, the political reality, the cultural reality, the linguistic structures, all that are biased towards Western and are misinterpreted in non-Western in context of non-Western cultures. And this is coming out of research. And this, when I take further, is also validated by UNESCO study, where such representational bias in terms of gender regression, in terms of east west. I'll take you to another example of where white males were given preference over any other ranking, just because their names were white sounding. Okay, without any offense meant, please. This is just a research picked up by University of Washington, where it was realized that the names, white male names, were placed higher consistently, leading to some kind of biasness that these tools are capable of. Similarly, wherever there was a prompt which used keywords which represented middle level of management or higher level, it was connoted to be a male. So, judge, CEO, engineers, they were all represented as white males. So, this reinforcing of stereotyping is also definitely not in a very healthy manner. And this is, please, a Bloomberg research. Let us come to dominance of English, which Priya and we were talking about. When it comes to dominance of English, there is a complete, clear data, not just in India, but across very reputed industry academic collaborations of MIT and IBM, which shows that LLM map different languages, which could be many languages, set of many languages, but only English centric sets are picked up more favorably. So, this kind of biasness is again leading to a different kind of interpretations, which is very hegemonic and is very colored in many ways. So, all this, when the data was picked up, if you look at the slide, you would know across the models, primary training language is still English. And to prove my point, I'm running short of time, I know, but I would still show you what did I figure out. This is what DeepSeek revealed me. Okay, DeepSeek very clearly said that the training data is English being the most prevalent. If you look at this line, the English being the most prevalent just after the bullets. Okay, DeepSeek says that. I move to Claude. Claude also unabashedly admits that, okay, it's a great question, and my primary language is English. I go to ChatGPT. ChatGPT says, I'm trained on large mixture of languages sourced from public text, but primarily English, and then it comes to major world languages. And if you would find other languages are just minuscule part of this representation. Similarly, Gemini. So it again says very openly and honestly, my training is heaviest in English. So all this is just to prove my point. Similarly, Grok is most biased, unfortunately, and is trained massively in English. Okay, so this has led to a different kind of future. If whatever I just said, if I have to put it together in one slide, I call it as pest dilemma. Okay, this pest dilemma I had raised long ago. There'll be political connotations of this kind of problem. There will be economic connotations, which we are already facing. There will be social issues that will create unpredictable scenarios, even to the extent I said you might need crematoriums or burial grounds for obsolete robots who could be our future partners and not human beings. Okay, so that kind of disorder, that kind of hegemony of a tech or mechanized society, something like Wall-E kind of society, is possible. And last but not the least, we are leading to a lot of ecosystem damage in terms of e-waste, space debris, even our underground cables under sea, and what if internet goes off? That's my biggest question. Internet blackout. Okay, so please understand this pest dilemma is not a creation or a whim of fancy which is coming out. I read a lot of fiction, I see a lot of science fiction, but I also do a lot of research. And all this probably is right in front of you as a combination. So eventually, what I'm trying to say is society might have people marrying machines, which is like we've already seen some of those examples. I'm showing it on the screen, but I won't stay here. I'll come to the moot point after this. The moot point after this is a need to stop and pause, which was alarmed by Elon Musk himself. Look at the irony. In 2023, he said, let's pause, sign a 6 month pause. I think nothing happened on that front tangibly. Okay. Subsequently, in 2025, we find a similar alert from Chinese premier where he warned that AI may become a main controller of the world, and he urged global cooperation to prevent concentrated knowledge power. Well, who's talking? I'll say. Okay, I'll just just not go beyond that. Okay, and now let's look at my India. I went to UN recently to talk about AI in public administration, and I said India's AI governance is very unique. Okay, without any religious background or influences, we have one part of our work, of our society recites Hanuman Chalisa. So there we call that God as our shield. AI is our shield. It's trying to protect our governance from corruption. And that God is deemed as Vidyavan, the fountainhead of wisdom. In this case, we are using AI for predictive intelligence to give direct benefit transfers to people who are at the bottom of the pyramid. AI has been deemed as Mahavir, augmented power, where it is able to do something in a wink of eye or a split of second, especially during COVID days when we were able to do COVID vaccine, anti-COVID vaccination for the entire 1.4 billion with 98% success. Okay, it is our savior. It is expected to be Sankat Mochan, where it would alleviate sufferings without causing harm to us, because our principle is AI for all. Okay, our principle is encourage startups. Our principle is ensure that skills are at point. We are moving towards technology sovereign nation, because all our programs are having an underlying message which says AI for all. Okay, UPI is a good point to that effect, that we don't want power or privileges coming out of technology concentrated in few hands or for the top of the iceberg or in hands of big techs. We are trying to ensure that we have digital public infrastructure, which is a populace wise democratizing tool in technology. So, what do we need? We need to go back and relook at our approaches. If you look at the dichotomy of these two approaches, the dichotomy of these two approaches is uh, irrespective of my staying here. If you look at literature also, or if you look at examples also, the Western approach has always focused on profit. It has focused on it, kind of focused on individual gains. It has focused on capital concentration. Okay. Whereas the Eastern communities, not just India, but all others also, but because I come from India, so I can say that with confidence, has always focused on for all, which is community driven approach. We focused on cultural context, that is, we are able to blend our AI tools like Bhashni with 22 languages with ease and can translate very smoothly. Our main focus is also environmental stability in terms of we balance nature with existence. So it's not that one approach is bad or I'm anti-capitalist and another approach is good. No. Time has come for us to blend both the approaches. The collective well-being of the world should be balanced with the reasoning and profit motive of the West. So that is what would be my final shot, which I also said at UN headquarters at New York when I was invited to talk about AI and public administration. Very confidently, I said that all of us need to have cross country collaborations so that we create tools and technologies that can serve everybody universally and can uplift the humanity rather than dividing it. I am very clear we don't want another kind of digital divide in the world. Thanks a lot. All this has come through a bevy of researchers who are constantly helping me to do research and come up with such crisp presentations. Thanks a lot. and thought pieces. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Charru. And now moving on to our second guest speaker of today is Susan Otieno, a lawyer and a researcher based in Nairobi, Kenya, with a background in intellectual property and a passion for where art and technology meet. She's especially curious about how new technologies raise big ethical questions and how culture and the law can guide innovation. In her day-to-day, aside from research, Susan facilitates trainings on data protection, AI ethics, and visual storytelling, helping people feel more confident about navigating today's tech-driven world. The floor is open to you, Susan.
Thank you so much. I will share my screen right quickly. Please let me know if you can see it.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, let me just sorry, is it filling the screen? Is it okay, or do I need to maybe?
It's good. It's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much for the introduction. I believe Professor Charru has done quite a wonderful job of setting not just the global tone, but kind of giving perspective into what's happening in India. We are a bit further back in terms of Kenya. However, I will kind of take us through a bit of a historic path and then leading up to where we are now, which is kind of coming up with our own regulation when it comes to artificial intelligence. So, as you've heard, my name is Susan Otieno, and I think I'm quite curious as to what, especially in Kenya, as was mentioned as the kind of topic in terms of looking at low to middle income countries. I'm quite interested in what our perspective and approach would be in terms of AI governance, especially because when we look at our positionality, we have started as consumers of these technologies, and then now we are looking at how we can set a more kind of deterministic path for ourselves, specifically with regulation, with governance overall. And so that is really bringing us back to asking these fundamental questions around what is our context? And how do our laws speak to that? And so this took me back to kind of colonial period where we kind of began this history of adoption and kind of continuing or perpetuating colonial structures that were set by the British administration. And so the context at that time was that the a British colonial administration brought a legal system, the English common law and precedent system, that was ideally benefiting the settlers. And so it was not made for Kenyans. It was something that was imposed upon us and continues to this day in different degrees. So when I think about that, it takes me to our sense of understanding, and maybe from an ideological perspective, how we are able to address our needs when it comes to emerging technologies or this new era of digital life, where we have blended kind of offline, online existence and kind of the challenges and opportunities that come with that. As a country, we are still saddled with some of the laws, for example, that have been kind of adopted from the colonial period. And over the past years, it has essentially been kind of taking corrective measures through legislative action. However, we are still operating from the perspective of, for example, cash crops. We do not at scale kind of plant or grow food that is indigenous to us. We grow to export, so the tea, the coffee, etc. And there are various examples where we see that we are viewed from the perspective of the West as being able to only provide resources and labor, rather than viewing ourselves as a sovereign state that is an agent in its uh, um, governance as a state. And so, legislative action to kind of incorporate statutory, customary, and religious laws, and most notably being the Constitution in 2010. And this Constitution set out the right to privacy, which is the underpinning of our Data Protection Act that was established in 2019 or enacted in 2019. However, the legal system that was adopted post-colonial time did not speak to our context, which has diverse cultural and traditional practices. And this is really at the core of how we are navigating from a regulatory perspective the issue of digital technologies, where we're seeing practices such as scraping, which is known that these big tech companies are crawling the internet and training their models with data that is not clean, legislation and regulation, and this kind of impacts our ability to protect and also create enforcement mechanisms for emerging sectors in our law. And so I think one of the big things that also came up for me, and something that Professor Charru has spoken on quite extensively, is bias. And bias is what tips the scales and contributes to harmful outcomes, because ideally it is preference, or leads to discrimination. Specifically, I believe what was being referenced is algorithmic bias, which can lead to unfair discrimination, and this would be embedded in artificial intelligence systems. And so this bias would mirror and amplify existing social prejudices that are present in the real world. And for us, a lot of the issues are coming in because we have particular needs and particular challenges in our context. For example, in Kenya, we have the digital divide, we have the rural to urban divide, where right now we have about 5 to 7 million people in Nairobi, and the wider population are in the rural area with limited or intermittent access to electricity, which means not everyone is able to, for example, access the internet. Not everyone is able to kind of access government services, and so there's disproportionate access, which impacts their ability, of course, to interact with these technologies. And also, when they interact with these technologies, there is the issue, as was raised by Professor Charru, of the language of the data not being representative because it's trained on ideally data from the West. And also, when we see the data sets that are being used to train these models, they are not representative of Africa, much less Kenya. And so these are the part of the harmful outcomes that come out of the bias. And also, of course, as Professor Charu has raised, there are other kind of broader issues as well. I thought to mention these two examples, or these two scenarios. So earlier this year, when USAID pulled out, or there was a kind of a disruption, it impacted the Kenya electronic medical records system. And though the system was managed by the Kenyan Ministry of Health, it was operated by a US aid-funded implementing partner. And ideally, the ministry did not no longer had access to the system when it went dark, and most had to now switch to manual, kind of a manual setting for kind of handling the records. And this speaks to our a bit, or like what our position is when it comes to technologies and also like data specifically, how are we able, or are we, what is the practical kind of situation when it comes to things like data localization, data sovereignty? Are we having that conversation? Are we able to have that conversation, or are we limited in our capacity because we are looking to funders or donors to facilitate certain operations within government, which of course will impact how we are able to operate. And then I think this one set a precedent within kind of the idea of enforcement, especially when it comes to the cross-jurisdictional impact of certain work that is being done. And Professor Charru as well mentioned the Kenyan workers doing content moderation, but another aspect is data annotators. So data annotation is essentially the labeling of data, of raw data like images, text, audio, and the labeled data sets then are used for machine learning and AI. And of course, these are for functionalities such as pattern recognition, identifying objects in images, and transcribing speech. And so, as has been mentioned, some of these workers are there is no example of legal status for some of these works allows for kind of create certain vulnerabilities for these workers because they then do not have any protections or rights, as it were. And so this was the situation where Summer Source had contracted some Kenyans and I believe from other nationalities in Africa, and they were of course, working as content moderators for Meta. And the working conditions were not good. The payment was not good. And then Somersault proceeded to fire them or dismiss them, and without cause. And so they sued Meta for this. And the response from Meta initially was that Kenya did not have jurisdiction to handle such a matter, and then when it went further, the Court of Appeal held that they can be sued, and I think this was quite a substantial precedents and how we can start to look at enforcement on a wider scale or a global scale because the impact of these uh,
Excuse me,
technologies, the
Susan.
development
Your
and the
voice
deployment of
keeps
these
cutting in and out.
technologies
We can't hear
is
you.
beyond jurisdiction. And so this was quite, yes,
Your
me now?
voice is cutting in and out.
Okay. Are you able to hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you, but there have been certain remarks that you were making that
Moments.
were not heard. So I think maybe it could be your connection. But just be mindful
Okay.
of that because it's possible that other people are, unable to
Right.
hear everything.
Okay. I'll speak slower and I've switched off the connection, the Wi-Fi on my other device as well. Apologies for that. I was generally saying that these are two um, examples of some of the issues that we are dealing with in Kenya when it comes to I think AI dependence, but the broader conversation around how Kenya, for example, is looking at regulating artificial intelligence, specifically in the context of the use of these technologies, and also our whether we look to moving beyond being users to being either developers or or otherwise, depending on what our capacity is. And so the labor rights for tech workers, I believe, was a substantial precedent set by the Kenyan courts where it spoke to enforcement and kind of bringing big tech companies to book, specifically within our jurisdiction. And I do believe that it will uh, support other claims in the future, because, for example, the people that sued Meta have already unionized and are now working to kind of just build awareness and continue to secure certain rights for tech workers in Kenya. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention is an arising concern that is coming out of this issue of Kenyans uh, um, Kenyan workers,
Susan, we
or
cannot hear you.
Kenyan tech workers, or help GPT move. I don't know what it could be because I've switched off everything else.
I think what we could do is maybe just wrap it up and then we
Yeah,
can
right.
have
Okay.
you and maybe ask a question because it happens when
Right.
once in a while. So let me just mute myself and then you can just finish and then we can do the Q&A session.
Okay. Okay. So, yeah, I think these really speak to some of our issues in Kenya, and also what strategic litigation and also the Kenya court are doing to mitigate the legislative gap that exists in terms of responding to the issues that we're facing, uh, specifically with regard to protection and enforcement. And so, yeah, like they're in the slides, and hopefully you're able to see. And so I think this is pretty much a nice kind of illustration of what's happening for us. And I think it's important to look at also what is our context. So as I mentioned, we are in the process of regulating or thinking about our direction. We have a national AI strategy and are developing an AI policy, which will support our Data Protection Act. And that's where we are as at now, but we are still grappling with some of the issues around these technologies being deployed in our jurisdiction. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Susan. And I think what we can do is, I don't see any questions from the audience. Maybe there's some shy folks out there. Um, Rohana or Irini, would you have a question that you'd like to ask? Or should we just have um, Susan and Charu ask each other a question? I think maybe let's do that. So please go ahead, guests. Susan, would you have a question for Dr. Charu Malhotra that you'd like to ask?
Yes. So once again, thank you so much for the presentation. It's really interesting to look at just everything that in terms of considerations that we should be making or having. My question to you is, so one of the things that we're dealing with, I think across in Africa is and you've mentioned language. So there's this kind of sense of flattening either, like our cultures, our practices, because it's cheaper. It's cheaper to roll out, ChatGPT in English because, it's the global lingua franca. And so there's this kind of idea that because it has always been, it will always be. And even in the training of these technologies, they are scraping data that is mostly of the West. And for us to collect data of our own is going to take a lot of time. So in your mind, what do you think we can start to do in terms of creating our own data sets?
Awesome. Thank you, Susan, for all the kind words and lovely presentation. In fact, Priya, if you would have noticed, there was a divine continuity in our discussions. I brought in Kenya and she highlighted that so beautifully. So, okay, so now to your question. Thanks, Priya, for that. Okay, so now to your question. India has a lesson, a cue for everybody, not just your part. We have started with crowdsourcing of data sources, data sets, sorry. So Bhashni, the AI model which I brought out, is actually, please do look up on that, is Government of India's initiative to translate all the 22 languages in our Constitution 8, Section 8 of our Constitution. And obviously, it was very tough. You know, India is one of the biggest multilingual country in the world. So it was very tough to even do it for 22 languages. So what we started was donate your sets. Okay, this is called in Hindi as Bhasha Dan. Bhasha means language, Dan means donate. So Donate Your Language is a crowdsourcing platform within Bhashni where any person, any citizen in the country can donate 5 sentences in their language and its corresponding translation in another Indian language. So they can speak that, they can type that, and they can also, give a video on that. So this is one initiative where co-creation of data sets in a country as diverse as India is very successful. And we are already moderating it. Moderating it is also done in a very practical way. We do it very systematically. We have conceptual frameworks to moderate bhashadan input. If you recall, Susan, go back to Wikipedia days. Wikipedia was all crowdsourcing information. It still does. And then it brought in a layer of experts to moderate the content that was being donated. So India is following that. Maybe Kenya could look into that. Second is we've started coming up in a big way with indigenous technologies where our startups are trying to not ape the Western machines, but we came up with this model almost 11 to 12 years or maybe 20, 2 decades earlier, which was Simputer, simple computer. So it's a small handhold held device created by our IITs, which doesn't need much energy, which is using some basic apps, which is community driven. So we have Simputer for farmers, where you get everything which a farmer needs, and similarly other kinds of Simputer for different domains. So that's another initiative. Then we came up with alternative sources of energies. So we have Gobar gas thela, which is like run not on electricity, because electricity is definitely scarce in countries like yours and mine, especially in our outlier rural areas. I can't recall the percentage, but certain percentage of my country are still having erratic supply of electricity. We are 100% lit, but the supply has to be also 100%. So in those areas, we are trying to look for alternative sources of energy to run these machines. What is important here, Susan, is to practice in spirit and word public, private, and academic partnerships. India is relying a lot on IITs to do their research. Industry has set up a lot of centers in our academic institutes of eminence. Government is fueling those centers, and the output is actually available for one and all without any commercial connotations. So it is a joint effort, and it is a lot of collaboration in a systematic manner, plus taking public on board. But also understand you can't onboard public till it is not literate or at a particular level. So very recently, Government of India has made AI learning compulsory from class 3 onwards by modifying its new education policy. So we're coming up with a multi-pronged approach. I think it might be useful for other countries to take a cue. Thank you.
Yeah, very much so. Thank you so much for those examples. Very, very helpful.
Thank you. Okay, I see a question from Irini. Susan, you could take it up first, then I'll take it. Thank you.
Okay. Um, A question to both. If independence on Western models is already a given, where do you see the real bargaining power for governments outside the West? Is it data market size, regulatory alignment, or something else entirely that Western actors tend to underestimate? Thank you so much for your question, Irini. For me, it would be just context-specific curation. So when you look at the data sets, especially in Africa, like for example, if these models are being deployed in Africa, they are not representative, right? So there's an opportunity for us to not only be represented in the data, but to curate the data so that it is context specific to our locale. I think there's a very great opportunity there. And then I think for us, we also need to understand how we are going to navigate this idea of um, like ownership, data ownership. How do we build pathways for us to empower ourselves and understand the value of our data? And I believe Professor Charru has brought it up as well, literacy, and specifically AI literacy. I think it's key so that we understand what powers, what fuels, and how this kind of AI models work. And we can then imbue that into whatever works in our particular locales or jurisdictions. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. I think India is also going the same way. I would just say India is trying to strengthen its digital sovereignty. It's trying to strengthen its labor protection rights to mitigate the risk associated with AI dependence on these countries. And I've already said that India is trying to move towards well-being of all, is trying to safeguard its innovations. And hence our DPDP Act, Digital Personal Data Protection Act, in 2023 it was launched. It's called DPDP 2023. So this act is giving certain exemptions to statistical institutes, to government institutes that are on welfare. Don't forget, we are welfare state. So wherever which ministries are giving subsidies, they are exempt from DPDP Act. So government of India is trying to liberalize the startup environment, innovation environment, trying to still ensure well-being of its citizens. And while doing this, we are going big way on digital sovereignty. I remember one of our, officers, Registrar Amitabh Ranjan said that India is actually producing more than what was slated in terms of GPU production. I think it was 10,000. We've already, as per him, gone up to 13,000 GPUs established. But I'll have to look back into data or hear Amitabh Ranjan again. But this is what I wanted to tell you, that India is actually on a very different journey, which is ensuring that sovereignty is there, which we in Hindi called as Atmanirbhar or self-reliance. And also, while doing this, we protect startups and we ensure well-being of all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. This has been such an amazing conversation.